Hello, Year 7, and welcome to today's lesson. To start off with, a knowledge retrieval task. Here are 5 language devices that we've come across whilst we've been studying Voyagers. I'd like you to tell me what they are. What does juxtaposition mean? What is personification? What is sensory language? What is a metaphor? What is a simile? What you need to do is write down the term, and then you need to write down what you think it means in a full sentence. What is juxtaposition? What is personification? What is sensory language? What is a metaphor? What is a simile? Write your answers down. It should take you about 5 minutes. When you're ready, move on to the next slide. And here are the answers. You should hopefully have written something a bit like this. A juxtaposition, placing 2 or more things side by side to compare or contrast them. That is a juxtaposition. A comparison for effect. Personification is giving human characteristics to something which is not alive, something which is not human. Number 3, sensory language, using words which appeal to the reader's senses. 4, a metaphor is a comparison without using like or as. And number 5, a simile is a comparison which does use like or as. Check your answers, tick the ones you got right, and improve the ones that you didn't. Today we're carrying on our consideration of Voyagers, and we're thinking about how writers use different kinds of sentences. Last time we looked at a very famous 19th century story about the sea, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Today we're going to look at a slightly more modern story about the sea and a slightly more modern monster. And we're going to think about how the writer of this particular story builds suspense. We're going to take a look at an extract from a very famous film called Jaws. And you might not be aware that the film Jaws, which was one of the most successful blockbuster movies of the 1970s and launched the career of the famous film director Steven Spielberg, was based on a book by a guy called Peter Benchley. And if you want to see a trailer for the film, you'll find a link to it in the PowerPoint or on the PDF. And Jaws was written in 1974, and Peter Benchley was interested in shark attacks after he read about a shark fisherman called Frank Mundus, who he heard about in the 1960s. And the story of Jaws rather, is about a young woman who is killed by a shark near a town called Amity Island. The police chief, who is a character called Martin Brody, wants to close the beaches because he's worried that the shark might attack again. The mayor overrules him because the mayor is worried that if people think that there is a shark on the loose, they won't want to come to the town, and the town relies upon tourists. An ichthyologist, that's a specialist in marine life, ichthyologist Matt Hooper and the grizzled ship's captain Quint offer to help the police chief to capture the killer beast, the killer shark, and the trio engage in an epic battle of man versus nature. And I have to say, Jaws is a great film if you get the chance to see it. And I think it's now got a U rating. I'll have to check. It might be 12, so you could certainly watch it. And the last half an hour in particular, absolutely fantastic. There's a point when the 3 guys are on the ship searching for the shark, and Quint, who is this complete lunatic, a brilliant character, He's played by an actor called Robert Shaw, who is an absolutely superb actor. He gives a speech about being on an American Navy ship which gets sunk, and the sailors are being slowly eaten by sharks. It's one of the most brilliant speeches you'll ever see on film. Strongly recommend it. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. It's a good film, and if you get a chance to watch it, you should. Right, so a bit of the magic just destroyed here. You'll realise I've stopped recording to check that I was right about the previous slides, and I was right about one thing, I was wrong about another thing. Jaws is rated PG, and indeed has been rated PG since the late 90s. So if your parents are okay with it, then you're allowed to watch Jaws. And as I say, it's a great film, a little bit gory, obviously. You know, there's a couple of scary bits, but it's a very good film. Um, I was wrong about ichthyologists. Ichthyologists are basically marine biologists who study various species of fish. So I was a bit wrong about that. But I was right about Jaws. So I think a 1-1 score draw is fine. Anyway, on with the lesson. Here's an extract from Jaws, and it tells the story of the great white shark. This is describing how the shark hunts. This is a 2-page reading, so it carries on after the next slide. In 35 feet of water, the great fish swam slowly, its tail waving just enough to maintain motion. It saw nothing, for the water was murky with motes of vegetation. The fish had been moving parallel to the shoreline. Now it turned, banking slightly, and followed the bottom gradually upward. The fish perceived more light in the water, but still it saw nothing. The boy was resting, his arms dangling down, his feet and ankles dipping in and out of the water with each small swell. His head was turned towards shore, and he noticed that he had been carried out beyond what his mother would consider safe. He could see her lying on her towel, and the man and child playing in the wave wash. He was not afraid, for the water was calm, and he wasn't really very far from shore, only 40 yards or so. But he wanted to get closer, otherwise his mother might sit up, spy him, and order him out of the water. He eased himself back a little bit, so he could use his feet to help propel himself. He began to kick and paddle towards shore. His arms displaced water almost silently, but his kicking feet made erratic splashes and left swirls of bubbles in his wake. The fish did not hear the sound, but rather registered the sharp and jerky impulses emitted by the kicks. They were signals, faint but true, and the fish locked on them, homing. It rose, slowly at first, then gaining speed as the signals grew stronger. The boy stopped for a moment to rest. The signals ceased. The fish slowed, turning its head from side to side, trying to recover them. The boy lay perfectly still, and the fish passed beneath him, skimming the sandy bottom. Again, it turned. The boy resumed paddling. He kicked only every third or fourth stroke, Kicking was more exertion than steady paddling, but the occasional kicks sent new signals to the fish. This time, it needed to lock on them only an instant, for it was almost directly below the boy. The fish rose. Nearly vertical, it now saw the commotion on the surface. There was no conviction that what thrashed above was food, but food was not a concept of significance. The fish was impelled to attack. If what it swallowed was digestible, that was food. If not, it would later be regurgitated. The mouth opened, and with a final sweep of the sickle tail, the fish struck. The boy's thought was that he had been punched in the stomach. The breath was driven from him in a sudden rush. You'll have noticed that Peter Benchley uses a range of different types of sentence. And what I'd like you to do is I'd just like you to copy down the different types of sentence. So put the subheading sentences, and we've got different kinds of sentences used to create different effects, and this can really make your writing a lot more interesting. They can communicate different emotions, they can have different effects. So sentence number one is a simple sentence, otherwise known as an independent clause. The word clause basically means sentence. And there are two examples. The boys went to the park. We like pizza. They are simple sentences. They have a verb and a noun, and they communicate a single idea. They are simple sentences. Write down what a simple sentence is. A simple sentence is an independent clause. Write down a couple of examples. You can use my examples or you can use your own. Then we've got compound sentences. And compound sentences are basically two clauses, two independent clauses, two simple sentences connected by a conjunction or by punctuation. We looked at punctuation, particularly semicolons. This is where you might use a semicolon. The boys went to the park, but they did not go to the zoo. We like pizza, and we like spaghetti. The boys went to the park makes sense. They did not go to the zoo makes sense. We've used but, which is a conjunction, to connect the two. We like pizza is a sentence. We like spaghetti is a sentence. They both make sense. They're both independent clauses, but they are connected by a conjunction. And that gives us a compound sentence. Simple sentences, a single clause that makes sense. Compound sentences, two or more independent clauses that link with a conjunction or generally a semicolon. The last type of sentence we're going to think about is a complex sentence. And a complex sentence is where you have an independent clause, like a simple sentence, but then one or more dependent clauses. And a dependent clause is effectively a sentence that does not make sense on its own. For example, the boys did not go to the zoo because they went to the park. The boys did not go to the zoo is the independent clause. That sentence makes sense on its own. Because they went to the park doesn't. Because they went to the park doesn't make sense. It's one of the reasons why you don't start with a sentence with because. The word because requires there to be something that comes before it, because is a kind of comparison word. It is about connecting two separate thoughts. The boys did not go to the zoo, that's fine. Because they went to the park explains why the boys did not go to the zoo. Therefore, because they went to the park is what we call a dependent clause. It depends upon the first part of that sentence to make sense. In the next one, although I dislike spaghetti, I really like pizza. In this case, the independent clause is I really like pizza. I really like pizza makes sense on its own. Although I dislike spaghetti doesn't. Now that's important because as with the previous one, I dislike spaghetti, that would make sense. Although I dislike spaghetti doesn't make sense. Words like although, before, because, although, when, since, if, that, even though, they are all what we call subordinating conjunctions. And what that means is that if you add those words to an independent clause, it becomes a dependent clause. It needs the other part of the sentence to make sense. That makes complex sentences. A dependent clause, which includes one of those words, an independent clause, which makes sense on its own. You might want to just read back over those. Please make sure that you've written them down. Please make sure that you are clear what the difference is between a simple sentence, a compound sentence, and a complex sentence. I'd like you now to have a look at these 10 sentences. Some of them are simple, some of them are compound, some of them are complex. And I'd like you to sort them out. You can draw the table if you like, or you can just write 3 lists. It's fine. But I'd like you to write out the sentences. Number 1, my sister is older, but my brother is younger. Is that simple, compound, or complex? The pig snorted at its trough. Should I stay in or should I go out? The girl was playing football while her brother watched TV. I can't wait until lunchtime. I desperately want to do my homework. The black dog yelled because he was after the cat. I like jam, but I love marmalade. The boy saw the spider and screamed. Whenever the spider web moved, the spider caught a fly. And here are the answers. Simple ones. The pig snorted at its trough. I desperately wanted to do my homework. I can't wait until lunchtime. The compound sentences. I like jam, but I love marmalade. Should I stay in or should I go out? The boy saw the spider and screamed. My sister is older, but my brother is younger. And the complex sentences. Whenever the spider moved, the spider caught a fly. The black dog yelled because he was after the cat. The girl was playing football while her brother watched TV. Tick the ones you got correct and correct the ones that you didn't, and then move on. The way sentences are used can be as important as the language that they contain, as we've mentioned. So we've got simple sentences, we've got compound and complex sentences. And I'd like you to think about the different effects that they have. What effects do you think simple sentences have? What effects do compound and complex sentences have? Now, if you are able to, and you can print this out, then what you can do is print this particular slide out and you can draw lines. So which effects would you link to simple sentences? Which effects would you link to compound, complex sentences? If you can't print the slide out, then simply write the heading simple sentences and write down the effects you think simple sentences have. Write down the effects you think complex and compound sentences have. So for example, one effect that simple sentences have is to build tension quickly by getting to the point. One effect that compound complex sentences have is to add detail and add description. So have a look at those other effects. To slow down the pace, to build tension slowly by hinting and foreshadowing what will come, to speed up the action, to emphasize one idea. Which of those effects do you think link to simple sentences? Which of those effects do you think link to compound and complex sentences? Either draw the arrows if you can print out this slide, or write the list underneath the heading simple sentences. Compound and complex sentences should take you about 3 minutes. When you're ready, move on to the next slide. And there you go. Simple sentences, they build tension quickly by getting to the point. They speed up the action. They emphasize one idea. Compound or complex sentences, they slow down the pace. They build tension slowly by hinting and foreshadowing what will come. They add detail and description. Tick the ones you got right, correct the ones you didn't, and then move on to the next slide. You might be wondering what all this has got to do with JAWS. Well, this is what it's got to do with JAWS. I want you to think about how Benchley uses language in the extract. I'd like you to reread the extract, or if you want to jump back to that point in the presentation, listen to me reading it again. And I want you to think about how Benchley uses sentence structure, particularly towards the end of the extract as the shark prepares to attack. I've got 6 quotations from the extract. I want you to think about the effect that the writer has by using those particular words and sentences. What you need to do is you don't need to copy out the sentence. You just need to put the number and you need to explain what the effect is and why. For example, the first sentence, in 35 feet of water, the great fish swam slowly, its tail moving just enough to maintain motion. Now that's obviously a complex sentence. And we think about this, the word slowly creates a menacing image of the shark stalking its prey. And the use of the complex sentence, that long sentence split up with commas, creates that effect of the shark taking its time, creating tension. We're not sure when the shark is going to attack. The next one, the boy was resting, his arms dangling down, his feet and ankles dipping in and out of the water with each small swell. What is the effect there of that use of a compound sentence? Number 3. It rose slowly at first, then gaining speed as the signals grew stronger. you'll notice that that sentence is a bit shorter than the previous ones. What's the effect of that? What words stand out? Number 4, the boy stopped for a moment to rest. A simple sentence. Towards the end of the extract, we know what's happening. What's the effect of that sentence? What's the effect on the reader? Again, it turned. And the mouth opened, and with a final sweep of the sickle tail, the fish struck. What is the effect of those sentences? The simple sentence, the compound sentence. Write down the number of the sentence. Write down what you notice about the length of the sentence. Write down the effect that this creates for the reader. Last task, and this should take you about 15 minutes. I want you to imagine a situation a bit like the one in Jaws, where a hunter is preparing to attack its prey. I'd like you to include a range of different sentence types: simple, compound, and complex. When you have finished, I'd like you to identify the different kinds of sentence that you've used. I want you to pick one of each, one simple sentence, one compound sentence, and one complex sentence. I'd like you to explain why you have used it. Now you can write from the point of view of the hunter, you can write from the point of view of the prey, or you can write in the third person. If you think about the Jaws extract, we get the point of view of the shark and we get the point of view of the boy. It's totally up to you. But you must include a range of different sentence types: compound, complex, and simple. When you've written your paragraph, reread it, identify your simple sentences, identify your compound sentences, identify your complex sentences. And then when you've done that, I'd like you to explain why you've used one of each: a particular simple sentence, the effect you wanted to create; a compound sentence, the effect you wanted to create; a complex sentence, the effect you want to create. When you've done that, I'd like you to photograph your work. I'd like to make sure that you've uploaded your work to the Teams assignment. Please make sure you attach the work. Once you've attached the work, please make sure you click the Turn In button, and then that is it.